Dying Light 2 is finally here after an excruciatingly long wait, especially since the first game was by far my favourite open world game from the PS4 generation. Drop kicking zombies, smashing their skulls and getting chased by a whole host of nasty creatures under the moonlight was plain and simple fun. And Dying Light 2 takes the idea of an open world zombie parkour action RPG even further. Yes, that's quite a mouthful. It clearly has a similar focus to the original, but promises more choices and consequence among the narrative and an adaptive world. So does it deliver on these promises, or does it crash and burn like the zombies under the UV light? Well, that's what I'm here to answer in GameXplain's review of Dying Light 2 on PS5. The game doesn't take long to establish itself with some high stakes from the get-go. You play as Aiden, a pilgrim who was searching for his missing sister by way of hunting down an old doctor who he suspects has valuable information about her. To complicate matters, you're plopped right in the middle of a war between the factions of Old Villador, though each can offer help in finding the doctor's whereabouts. Dying Light 2 significantly ramps up the story and characters compared to the first game, making for a more compelling plot, but I was even more excited for the opportunity of having some impact on the story through significant choices and their consequences throughout the game, and I'm happy to say that Techland succeeded in this endeavour. As an example of these choices, when you turn on power stations you can choose which faction to give them to, and not only do these choices affect the narrative, they also affect the world. The Peacekeepers, one of the game's factions, litter the world with traps and bombs to help you kill zombies, where the survivors offer improved zip lines and air vents to help traverse. You can feel the consequences of your actions, especially in the few heartfelt moments that I won't show to avoid spoilers. In any case, these choices can come back to bite you in the ass or save you just in the nick of time. Some choices had me questioning everything I had done up to that point, and I found myself making a complete 180 on my decisions and switching sides, which I almost never do in games like this. Each faction has plenty of characters to interact with, perhaps too many though, as I often had to rack my brain to remember who was who. Thankfully, there are still plenty of memorable characters such as Lawan and her developing relationship with Aiden, and Hakon's cheesy but funny lines about his previous wives.
I don't know. It's all mixed up in my head.
You suppressed the memory. Like I did of my third wife. Look, I'm sure the infection ain't helping.
Unfortunately, the character acting is kinda janky and it takes me out of the experience slightly. Animations are overall a complete mixed bag, ranging from pretty decent to strange looking. In RPGs like this, I think you either go for static characters like The Outer Worlds or fully animated conversations like Horizon Zero Dawn, but I always find them to be slightly jarring with how janky some of the animations can be no matter which side you lie on. It's not exclusive to Dying Light, but it's something I've noticed a lot. The conclusion to the story was satisfying. Typically in open world games like this, I tend to leave the story to the end after I've had my fun in the world, but at a certain point I was compelled to push forward and see the conclusion to Aiden's journey. The narrative is constantly twisting and turning, with deception being at the forefront of it all. Everyone has their own agenda, and in most cases they're willing to screw you over to achieve it, and I usually realise this too late. There are some seriously tough choices in the final few missions, and on a co-op playthrough I'd like to choose differently to see how different the outcomes are. The world has come a long way since the beginning of the outbreak in Dying Light 1, and it's reflected in the design of the locations. Where Dying Light 1 had settlements built around existing pre-outbreak buildings, the survivors of Old Villador have started building their camps out of whatever materials they can find. It feels apocalyptic with these makeshift structures in a world where nature's reclaiming land for itself. It makes for an immersive experience with a nice sprinkling of environmental storytelling that chronicles some grim scenes of people's final few hours in the apocalypse. The contrast between what was and what currently is now was quite beautiful, and I found myself getting lost in the narrative of the world.
That's heartbreaking.
That leads us on to the best part of Dying Light 2, and oh my lord, this game is one of the most fun games I have played since, well, Dying Light 1. Yes, I love the improvements in the story, but I'm absolutely over the moon with how enjoyable it is to run around the city. Dying Light feels like a mixture of Mirror's Edge and Borderlands. Aiden is well versed in parkour. Add on top of this a visceral melee combat system and randomised weapons, and you can see where I got that comparison from. Before we dive deep, allow me to explain a 30-second loop of Dying Light 2. It begins by leaping between rooftops, sliding underneath a barrier, paragliding on top of a group of zombies, bashing some skulls, drop kicking a few, and running out to repeat it all over again. It seriously never gets old. After 30 plus hours, I smile from ear to ear when I drop kick a zombie from a 4-story building. Pretty much every part of the city is climbable, and I mean everything. While there are certain things that stand out like yellow monkey bars or grappling points, if something looks climbable, then it is. I was impressed by the original and it feels significantly more fluid now. the melding of the fluid parkour system and the impactful combat meant I never felt bored. Everything in the Game Awards experience, whether it be combat or parkour experience, I always felt rewarded by simply playing the game. While I would have preferred a larger skill tree like the previous title, the difference between Aiden at the start and the end is staggering. All I could say is I'm certainly jumping back in to do more side objectives when I finish this review. Now, what about the side objectives? There's no point in creating great gameplay mechanics if the world itself isn't exciting to explore. It's what we've come to expect of checklist open world games. There's loot stashes to find, towers to climb, and bandit camps to clear. But where Dying Light differentiates itself is the contrast between night and day. Zombies are pretty easy during the day with slow movement speed and generally fewer in number. However, at night, more of the unique zombies come out to play, and the atmosphere when the sun goes down is terrifying yet exhilarating. The dark streets are littered with howlers, and if one of these see you, you better book it and run for your life, as they'll alert the other zombies to your presence just before they all try to chase you down. You do not want to mess up your parkour in these moments, so they were a great way to test out my skill, and I loved every second of them. There's 4 levels of heat when you are being chased, and each level adds more and more zombies to the chase. The worst of all are the volatiles that are absolute monstrosities that are extremely difficult to fight, so your best option is to run away. You also get extra XP at night, which is a nice reward for nearly crapping my trousers. Yeah, I don't do too well with horror. Another great implementation of the day-night cycle is buildings that have rare loot stashes in them. During the day they are littered with zombies, so your best option is to return at night so you have a better chance of getting in and out without getting swarmed. While in the dark you have an immunity meter, let this run out and it's game over. So you only have limited time in the dark before you either have to get back to a shelter with UV lamps or use an immunity booster. It was rarely an issue since resources to craft immunity boosters are quite common. At the start it added to the tension, but near the end of the game it was just a minor annoyance, which I personally liked as it helped in making Aiden feel stronger as the game progressed, and being honest, made the game less scary, which is always good in my book. Techland created a fantastic risk-reward system, and it melds perfectly with a game of this genre, making the more mundane parts of an open world game that small bit more engaging. You still go to point A to collect stash B or climb a radio tower, but the basics of gameplay are so fun that it kept me engaged. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. Despite featuring a few different display modes, the game looks decidedly last gen, which isn't unexpected since it began as a PS4 game. Distant buildings and foliage were quite low resolution and blurry, especially in performance mode. These issues are highlighted in the slower moments like walking around the settlement. However, the lighting is quite impressive, especially at sunrise with the sun splitting the trees. Apart from a small bit of testing in the other modes, I played the game primarily in performance mode at 60 FPS because a first person game like this can be headache central for me when sitting close to my monitor. The other 2 display modes available are resolution and quality. While there are no official confirmations about their specs, resolution runs at some form of 4K at 30 FPS, and quality runs at an unconfirmed resolution but focuses on graphical options like ray tracing and runs at 30 FPS. These modes do look noticeably sharper during gameplay, but in a game that is so frantic, there was no way I was playing it in 30 FPS. Fortunately, when jumping from rooftop to rooftop, the graphical quality meant absolutely nothing to me. I didn't notice any significant frame drops in performance mode, and I'm so happy that 60 FPS is standard on the next generation of consoles. Now, I did have quite a buggy experience while reviewing this game. Some have been fixed, but they did hinder my experience somewhat. I got stuck in the terrain maybe 10 or 15 times across 30 plus hours. Now, a quick restart fixed it, but it was only a minor annoyance. I can't show the next one because he was the final boss. He's the only real boss in the game actually, but he got stuck in the terrain twice and I had to restart the boss fight. There were a few other minor bugs and annoyances like slow menu navigation that generally gave the game an unpolished feel at times. I have a high tolerance for bugs, I absolutely adore AA games, but if you're sensitive to generally buggy experience then I would take this into consideration. Despite my issues, Dying Light 2 is a crazy amount of fun. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to test out the co-op, but I can already tell I'm going to have an even better time playing with a few friends. Techland improved upon the original in every single way. It's not quite the leap I was hoping for on a technical side, but the parkour is smoother, combat is more impactful, and the world is significantly more fun to explore with the paraglider and grappling hook. They set out to improve upon the narrative, and they certainly succeeded. I have very little memory of the story in Dying Light 1, but I have a feeling that won't be a problem this time around, as the game has more memorable characters and a great dynamic between the warring factions. Add to this some tough choices and you have an amazingly compelling experience that I won't forget anytime soon. Certain parts might feel a little janky, but the sheer amount of fun I had overrides any of these issues, and that's why I love Dying Light 2. There we have GameXplain's review of Dying Light 2 on PS5. I would love to know if you plan on picking this up in the comments below. Check out the videos on the right if you want more great content. Don't forget to subscribe to GameXplain, and I'll see you all on the next video.